welcome to council. Monday, August 2003. I call the meeting to order at 4:02. And sorry for the delay. We're just resetting the owl to make sure it works. So thanks for that. Remind everybody to silence their mobile devices. So put on to silent or vibrate mode. I got a motion here that council hereby accepts the agenda for Monday, August 28, 2023, regular meeting council as survey amended. Any additions or deletions to that? None? Moved by Councilor Suki, second. Councilor Valance, all in favor? Carried, thank you. Any declarations of interest today? Hearing none. I got the motion here that council hereby adopts minutes of the regular meeting of council that were held on Monday, June 26, 2023, a special meeting of council that were held on Tuesday, August the 8th, 2023, and Tuesday, August the 15th, 2023, and also a closed meetings of council that were held on Wednesday, July 5th, 2023, and Monday, July 24th, 2023, as circulated and amended. Moved by Councilor Valance, second by Councilor Suki. Any questions, errors, or omissions of those minutes? Hearing none, call question, all in favor? Carried, thank you. We'll move right on down to our CO report on verbal report on the domestic fowl status review. Mr. Skroczynski.
Thank you. So just wanted to provide council with a brief update with respect to the domestic fowl bylaw. If council recalls, we had looked at the potential of doing a pilot project in Marathon, and we had targeted September to bring the final report forward to council. Just wanted to advise council that we're likely anywhere from 30 to 45 days off of this mark for a few reasons. One is we've just been unable to recruit a bylaw officer. That position's been vacant since March, and we've been unsuccessful in attracting a quality candidate. Obviously, we need a bylaw officer to help implement and enforce any bylaw that goes into place with respect to animal control. So that's been one of the factors. We've yet to complete our writing on rewriting of the official plan and zoning specific writing with respect to bylaws to allow for domestic fowl. Currently, it's not allowable in residential zones. It's only allowable in rural zones. So we do have to continue to complete the writing with respect to that item. It has been started by both our CBO, our chief building official, and our contract planner, but we still have work to do on it. And until that work's done, we obviously can't bring forward the necessary bylaw amendments to council for approval. Then the other item that we've started to research and we've had some contact with the Thunder Bay District Health Unit, as there has been some cases in Ontario in the last number of months, and that's around the avian flu. It seems to something that was non-existent 6 to 8 months ago. Has certainly had some effects in some southern Ontario communities, specifically those that do allow for domestic fowl, specifically in rural areas. So we want to complete a little more research on that item to make sure we're most up to date on the potential effect it could have within our community, because although we may only be 4,000 residents, we're a dense community within 5 square kilometers. So a flu of that type of nature could have a broad effect, not necessarily on humans, but certainly could have effect on other wildlife such as cats and dogs and pets contained within residential areas. So work started on it, and I expect that we'll likely have something to mid-council, probably mid-October, with respect to a final report and recommendations for council approval or non-approval. So I want to just provide that update and then have the opportunity to answer any questions that council may have and make the public aware that we continue to proceed with the bylaw as per council's direction on a pilot project. We're just not quite there yet.
Okay, great. Any questions? We'll look forward to that report. Obviously, there's a lot of work behind the scenes in regards to that and getting it right. And then the recommendation obviously brought to our table. We can discuss it then. Just looking through my motions, I don't have a motion for the check run. So I'll read it out. We can get one done up, if you don't mind. So up next, I have the check runs to be approved. I move a second for that. Moved by Councilor Valance, second by Councilor Suki, that accounts payable in the amount of $1,597,631.02 and payroll in the amount of $234,613.71. In July 2023, accounts payable in the amount of $1,022,964.02. We'll have a motion written up and I'll just sign it afterwards, as well as payroll in that July 23rd timeline, $201,740.58. All in favor? Carried. Thanks. So up next, we have the report from us attending the London conference. Myself, Councillor Wheeler, and CEO Skorczynski attended on behalf of the municipality and brought various things. So I'll let Councillor Wheeler highlight some of his thoughts of the AMO conference.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Dumas. Yeah, it was my first AMO conference to be as my first conference of like that magnitude of that many people in one place. It was pretty impressive to see. As far as the speakers at the conference, the keynote speaker was Catherine McKenna, the former Minister of the Environment and Climate Change. She had a really good presentation talking about climate change action. And one of her big points was not waiting until like 2050 or 2030 when the deadlines are to make changes, to start, even though we might not be able to meet those targets now, to start making changes in our community to get there. And she kind of highlighted like a lot of the stuff that's going on in Kelowna and Northwest Territories now of examples of climate change and what it can do to different communities and provinces. Also got to see Premier Ford speak on his new housing initiatives and the Strong Mayors Act and how that ties into housing. And it'll be curious to see how Marathon can benefit from those new programs. And we also got to meet with Minister Surma, Minister Clark, and Minister Rickford. And the one thing I took away from those meetings was how impressed everybody was with Marathon and the way that we do things and how positive those meetings went and how positive they are about Marathon. It was really awesome to see that.
Yeah, thanks for that. And I think they reminded us quickly of how efficient we were, where we didn't have to get the pound on the door. Because we usually got 15 minutes and they're like pounding on the door. We were in and out probably in most cases 12 or so minutes before the 15 was up. I'll highlight my portion of the one. I'll go to Mr. Skorczynski after that if he has any input. The town of Brandon, obviously, as Councillor Wheeler mentioned, we met with Minister Surma in regards to that living center. Very positive outcome I felt from that meeting, and they're working with the federal government to develop a joint infrastructure program, first one in a while. So we're looking forward to that. Hopefully, be released in sometime in the fall. And we went on to meet with Minister of Northern Development Mines, talked about Peninsula Harbor specifically and some opportunities around the Northern Ontario Heritage Fund funding in that regards, as well as highlighting the Active Living Center. Minister made it very clear that there's opportunities for the Active Living Center, but they don't typically fund Active Living Centers as a whole. There's opportunities there, so we'll continue to work with that. Really, Mr. Skorczynski has a great relationship with the administrative portion of the Northern Ontario Heritage Fund as well. We then went on to meet with Ministers of Energy in regards to Marathon, looking at the opportunities under phase 3 of the program that for the funding for the natural gas, which we were originally with the LNG, with liquefied natural gas, since been changed to this, compressed natural gas. We were assured there is a phase 3 coming, and we're hoping that it'll be out soon. They talk about the fall, but there's going to be some discussion around the environmental registry site that there'll be opportunities to make a comment on that, and then they'll have some information. And Mr. Skorczynski took something away from that to talk to the parliamentary assistant as well as the chief staff member on that file. Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, we talked about the tiny home development, as well as we know our last meeting we passed the funding model for the federal housing initiative fund. So they also, what they've done in that, and as Councillor Wheeler just mentioned too about the housing portfolio, and NOMA's got a resolution coming forward there. They didn't have us little communities involved in it, but since that meeting in April, they recognize the smaller communities. So they're taking about 10% of the fund, and they're going to allow municipalities of 50,000 in rural municipalities to apply for that funding model. So that's really what we were there to argue for. We needed some of those dollars. And the government, I think, heard us, and then they're recognizing that. So 90% will go to the big communities, obviously. 10% of that fund for the 1.5 million home development program will come to us little communities. Then, of course, I had a busy 3, 4 days, 5 days with my position on NOMA board, as well as the AMO board. I also took in some of the actual conferences in between stuff. I had an opportunity to take part in the preliminary discussions, and the first one I attended was Monday morning and listened to some of the, the key speakers with, of course, President of AMO, And then some of the ministers, the Lieutenant General, and as well as some of the board government ministerial people in regards to that, as well as then Doug, the Premier himself, on Monday morning. Caucus lunches, I took part in the Northern Ontario sponsored the lunch by Power Generation. They talked a bit about the EV market and the growth of infrastructure for plugins, streamlining the building permit process for Ontario in regards to online submissions. That thing should speed up a lot of opportunity, take a lot of time off of our staff, not just in our community, but across the province, obviously. Preparing communities for a clean energy future, which was also sponsored by Hydro One, but it was in a different state about the battery situation. As we know, we just went through the battery replacement of our Zamboni. Where are those batteries going to go? And they couldn't give us the definite answer on that. So that's a real question and concern that came out of that session. I think in all over the provinces, where are the batteries going to go? We have 40 batteries coming out of that device. They're going to get recycled, but whereabouts and how they're going to land? So that was a key part of that discussion. Transforming health in Ontario, that's a big one. Obviously, there's a whole bunch that NOMA and AMO took place in regards to health, homelessness and addictions within Ontario. And then, of course, I also took part of the single registry electors sponsored by Elections Ontario. They're going to now take over the recording of residential and your name list for the electoral list starting in 2024. That'll be much better, I think, than Impact was doing. Not that Impact was doing such a terrible job, but there was less information provided. And then, of course, the preliminary programs in the Bear Pit session I took place on Tuesday afternoon, and then was done for the day on behalf of the town of Marathon. As far as NOMA, we presented to the government in regards to the public health and care funding model, and that was addressed with that. And we had a meeting earlier that morning with PNOM as well as NASDA. Talk about mental health and addictions and homelessness. That's a big problem. Number one, if you have a home, your mental health and your addictions can be subsided, but without a home or a place to call home, that creates a real problem. That was a big part of it. And of course, agency nurses and locums within the healthcare system is costing all of us. I spoke to the CEO in our two hospitals here at Terrace Bay Marathon, $1.3 million deficit, $1.3 million deficit for the 22-23 year cycle for agency nurses, and that comes directly out of their budget. You're running a deficit. That's 2 hospitals in Ontario. Take that across the board. They have to stop that. Bill 60 was a big part of it, where the privatization of healthcare. We talked about that. We don't want that. We asked that to be canceled completely from the Ford government. And then, of course, reinstate the permitting municipality retained surplus of taxations. As you know, we sell a surplus, sell a registered property for, say 10 grand's owed on it, and we get 20, we got to send the 10 grand to the province. That shouldn't be. We have very few means to address taxation and revenue generating, and that was one of them. Women in marginalized groups and the politics of Ontario, we want to have more emphasis put on that. So the minister clearly stated that they would work more on that programming and education, getting into schools and talking to the minorities as well as marginalized groups and women, to say you can run, you can be part of the system. And so that was a really big push from us through NOMA. And then of course, sale of Crown land. We all know Marathon is a prime example. A lot of our northern communities is Crown land. Our boundaries are here, but we only have access to utilize this much of land within that boundaries. So that's a big part of that. And then unorganized areas within that Crown land are paying nothing for taxation. That's been on the radar for a while. We were really frustrated with that with the government, because they're paying $200 or $300 on $1 million home and utilizing all the services and neighboring communities. So that's been a real issue. And of course, the big one, as always, we've been on this for a couple of different meetings now, is the Northern Road Safety and Maintenance. We did meet with Minister Mulroney, was at the table as well, and Minister Chu, Deputy Minister Chu was there as well. Cho, and he said clearly that they're working on it. As you know, they put a 2-for-1 system in North Bay. They're working on that, but they assured us they'll continue to focus and work with Northern Ontario, especially Northwestern Ontario, in regard to the highways and the snow conditions and the timelines. And we all know that anytime we can make a comment, they will address it as best they can within their contractor thing. And they've been tightening up on the fines, where they're still giving the fines, but they used to give a lot of, it would go up the ladder and they would waive the fine. They've been eliminating that. The fine's a fine now. So if the contractor's not meeting the timelines, the fine's issued. There's no more going up the ladder and getting that reduced. And a big part of that, at the end of that discussion, was talk about driver safety and training for our truck drivers coming into Canada. And they're trained in the south on the 401 and 401 systems, but they're driving on the northern highway systems, which is a little different. with the darkness, the snow, the hills, the curves, the two-lane highway systems. So they assured us they would continue to focus on that in the training aspect. We asked for a simulator to be incorporated as part of the training program, and they're gonna look into that as well. Then we shared more information in regards to all of that. So it was a very, very busy for me, conference. I got a lot out of it. And I think we made some good traction in regard to our meetings with the minister specific for Marathon. So I'm pleased with NOVA stuff as well as AMO, but I think Marathon did really well as well with Mr. Skorczynski and Councilor Wheeler and myself bringing the issues to the forefront. So hopefully we'll get some results in the fall. I don't know if you had anything to add to Mr. Skorczynski.
Just two additional meetings that we had. One of our delegations was with the Ministry of Mines. And we had the opportunity, we wrote a paper on the utilization of mining taxes in Ontario to help fund community development, such as recreation projects. So we presented that to the Ministry of Infrastructure at the Roma conference. And as well as we did that with the Ministry of Mines, and they're going to facilitate a discussion for us with the Ministry of Finance, who would ultimately be responsible to make those changes. We do have a track record. We have the only local forest management corporation in Ontario, which utilizes stumpage revenue. So they were certainly engaged in the conversation, and we'll have a follow-up discussion around that. We also had an opportunity. We bumped into the actual Minister of Mines, George Peary, at Timmins in the hallway, and we engaged in a conversation around fly-in, fly-out mining communities. And he's very committed to working with Marathon and Red Lake as well on ensuring that doesn't happen 100%, and that those employees live in the communities that they work. And then the other meeting that we had on a busy day was we met with some senior executives from Enbridge to talk about the potential partnership opportunities with the province, asking for consultation and comments on the natural gas phase 3 funding. And in our case, specifically looking at a virtual pipeline concept to help our project move forward. Obviously, we'll be non-pipeline, but there was a lot of interest around how we could potentially be a pilot project with our 5 communities that could be replicated across the province. So it was a really busy agenda. You know, as the mayor indicated, this is probably, I think we came away with, you know, usually you get a lot of lip service at these meetings. Councillor Suki's been at these conferences, but we got a lot of traction in this case. And Councillor Wheeler's correct. A number of the ministers indicated that other communities were talking about projects and models that Marathon has developed. So I think it was well worth our time, and I know it'll pay off down the road. Thank you.
Yeah, and thanks for that. We're hoping that come October, we can have that application process out for our active living center. So we'll be prepared as council is fully aware that, you know, the administration can bring back that final report and design concepts. We can move forward for early 24, potential tender process. So we'll see how that all rolls out, and hopefully the government makes an announcement. And if we have to, we'll go visit and really bang on the minister's door as well. And it is a lottery type system. That's the frustrating part, but if we can continue to put our project of the needs, not only for our community, but of course our neighboring communities, then we can have a lot more traction, I believe. And so we'll make that argument at the time. Once council approves that final report in the fall, when administration brings it, we can go with the knowledge that the application process is out there and ready to go. Okay, thank you. Yeah, it was a good conference. A little tricky to get there, always like always, but London's a good place, and we had lots of fun. Lots of work, lots of fun, lots of good connections as well. Okay, up next I have bylaw number 26 to be in a bylaw to authorize the execution of the Marathon agreement with Wilderness Helicopters for a bare land lease at the Marathon Municipal Airport to be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed this 28th day of August 2023. Moved by Councillor Mellon, second by Councillor Wheeler. Any questions on that? Hearing none, I'll call question. All in favor? Carried, thank you. Up next, we have the Franco-Ontario Day Act, which is a legislative act of April 26, 2010, which was declared September 25th of each year to be recognized as Franco-Ontario Day throughout the province of Ontario. Whereas September 25th is the anniversary of the first rising of the Franco-Ontarian flag to represent over 400 years of French representation in Ontario. Whereas there are more than 600,000 Francophones in Ontario, the largest Francophone community outside of Quebec. And whereas Francophone Ontarian Day has become an annual occasion to celebrate Francophone community. Now therefore be resolved that I, Mayor Rick Dumas, do hereby proclaim September 25th as Franco-Ontarian Day in and for the town of Marathon, and for us to join the community town in celebrating the execution and celebration of Ontario's growth and prosperity. Moved by Councilor Allen, second by Councilor Suki. Any questions on that? Okay, thank you. All in favor? Carried. Thanks. Up next, we have a resolution in regards to supporting NOMA. This resolution is council hereby supports the attached resolution received from Northern Ontario Civil Association pertaining to the housing resolution. And for that, copy of the motion before it onto the individual listing on the original resolution. Moved by Councilor Wheeler, second by Councilor Balance. Any questions, comments on that? That is part of that housing discussion that we just had through our discussions at AMO. So I think that the government, like I said, the government heard. And it's all hopefully going to be good once it's rolled out. And actually, Minister Clark was very, very welcoming and understood the issues around small rural parts of Ontario. And as you're fully aware with the Strong Mayors Act, that is for the communities that have probably 100,000. They wanted to bring it down to, I think, 50,000. If you hit 50,000 by 2031, you could apply for a Strong Mayors Act to give it a push for the housing portfolio. We're doing the right thing. We got 105 lot development, that's been out there for tender. We'll have some reports back. When do you expect that back, Mr. Skwarczynski?
October, we're still on schedule. We'll be in front of council in October.
So we'll have that report back in October in regards to our lot. And then, of course, we felt comfortable with the discussion on the tiny home portfolio down in Old Trailer Park. It was all good. All in favor? That motion carried. Thank you. A motion here that council hereby supports the test resolution received from the town of Fort Erie pertaining to controls on Airbnb, Vrbo, and others which affect municipal rentals. And further, a copy of this motion before out to individuals listed on the original resolution. Moved by Councilor Wheeler, second by Councilor Balance. Questions, comments on that motion? Councilor.
To my knowledge, I think there's maybe like 4 or 5 Airbnbs in town. I've never heard there being any issues, and they're also like owned, to my knowledge, also owned locally, right? So I don't think this would maybe affect Marathon as much as it would bigger cities or larger municipalities. I hate to take away from those ones that are running it successfully here, right? It's like if somebody has a wedding or a family reunion in town, it gives a nice place to rent.
Yeah, I don't think the resolution, so what the resolution is calling for is just stricter controls with respect to the registering of these facilities.
Yeah.
So as an example, like in our case, that they fall under our municipal accommodation tax. They have to provide that documentation to us. But what's happening in some communities that don't have let's say a MAT tax in place, is housing stock is being bought up solely for the use as Airbnbs and rental properties. So it's taking away from permanent housing solutions. And there's no controls or there's no legislation currently in place in Ontario to manage that. So this resolution is just, it's not asking for elimination of those services.
No.
It's just asking for more controls administratively for individual municipalities to ensure that there's some control in place over housing stock.
That's something you would support.
So it's something we
Yeah,
would support,
yeah,
absolutely.
no, it's definitely good to.
Yeah, I just don't want to affect like the ones that are.
Yeah.
No,
No, that's not what it's asking
Yeah,
for.
yeah.
It's just asking for more administrative control in each municipality to ensure they're aware of, what are the Airbnbs as an example.
Gotcha.
Yep, and I think we all know a lot of the providers and they're doing a great job and it's a hotel room in a different disguise, right? It's but they're doing well and so it's all good. And they also have to be registered with whatever it's Vrbo, Airbnb or any one of the products that are being available. And they have to, that's a registered income. They have to pay the taxes and all that. No different than the accommodation tax.
Okay, that I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah. All good?
Yeah.
All in favor? Carried, thank you. We have a motion here that council hereby supports the attached resolution received from the township of Emo pertaining to the black ash tree classifications. And that further copy of this motion reported on to the individual listed on the original resolution. Moved by Councilor Balance, second by Councilor Suki. Any questions on that? Black ash tree. All in support? Good. Thank you. Carried. Anything else? It was a quick meeting. So, we'll look forward to the reports coming in the fall in regards to some of the key projects we're working on. And again, I think it was a great thing. I did ask Councilor Wheeler if he wanted to speak at any one of our ministerial meetings, just to, get him involved. He said, no, I'm good. I'll just listen and absorb. So that was really good. And you took a lot away from that, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, it was a great experience.
Good. And it is a little bit intimidating sitting across, because typically you're sitting across from a whole raft of staff members. And sometimes, if you're new at the game, it does seem a little intimidating, but they're just like us, they're just doing a different job. And they're sometimes just the ones holding the purse strings. I think Minister Surma thought it was pretty funny when I mentioned, we were looking for some money from our parents and our grandparents. When she said about the federal and provincial government coming together, she thought that was pretty good. So maybe we'll get that memento memory in her head that maybe she'll recognize their projects, and hopefully we'll have some traction there. So that's great. Thanks for that. Thanks for the support there. It was good. Moved by Councillor Balance, second by Councillor Wheeler, that we adjourn at the hour of 4:28 PM. Thank you very much. Have a good night.